Strange times indeed. I'm Cliff McCallister. Welcome to Strange Times Indeed. Now, we've got some serious news right off the top. This week, we've got some serious news going on. Now, we always talk about the paranormal, the supernatural, perhaps sometimes the conspiratorial here on Strange Times Indeed, but it's always a shame when we have to turn our eye upon the paranormal community. Now, some of you, and in fact by some of you I say most of you, are probably aware that we did not broadcast last week. We here at Strange Times Indeed did our research and found that maybe it wasn't quite the time for our voices to be heard, so we took a week off. Now, as you know, you're probably aware of the situation that caused us to take a time off, the uprising going on across our country. Now, what must be discussed here is the paranormal community. This is a community sometimes marred by troubles, racism, underlying prejudices, all sorts of things, and a few things happen that we find majorly troubling. These are coming from some major people within the community. One of the first, Whitley Strieber, author of Communion. Well, yes, the famed abductee, took to his personal blog saying that he had reviewed the George Floyd killing tape many times and found that believed that it was a sort of deep state conspiracy, an intentional killing done by the deep state to trigger a race war. Now, we at Strange Times Indeed would like to say to Whitley Strieber, we'd like to say, yes, it was very much an intentional killing, but not an act by the deep state. This was an act performed by psychotic killer cops who have been shown time and time again that no matter who they kill, no matter who they harm, that they will never see consequences worse than desk duty. The current uprising happening across the country is not the result of a deep state ploy to kick off helter-skelter, but rather a boiling point for the long-abused black people of America. The uprising is not an act of the government. It is an act of the people, rising up against a corrupt and fascist ruling class. This might be scary to some, but here at Strange Times Indeed, we say it's about damn time. So that's our message to Whitley Strieber, but it doesn't end there. Benjamin Gundy, one of the main people running Mysterious Universe, he went on some sort of racist rampage on Twitter, screaming about how white privilege doesn't exist and all that nonsense. Now here is a rebuttal, because we need not lay on his words. We don't need to hear what he's spouting. It's on the internet. You can find it if you're really curious, but there's really no sense. Well, yes, we do. Do you want to hear it? I can go through some of his tweets. I would say Benjamin Gundy deserves none of your time looking at the paranormal community or any of that nonsense. Basically, he's saying that white privilege is something that is, doesn't exist, and systemic racism doesn't exist. There's too many quotes on to go pull from, but we are pulling the news story off of singular14.com, so you can read all of the awful things he said there. What I would like to bring up is the message brought up by Shane McClelland of the Q Files. He said, in response to these rants, that there's an ugly truth hiding at the core of the weird world. No matter which community you inhabit, paranormal, UFO, conspiracy theories, cryptids, etc., many of the foundations were laid by people who hold terrible views. Among them, white supremacy, racism, xenophobia, misogyny, homophobia, and transphobia. It is imperative for us to accept that truth and recognize that few of these views are often expressed clearly and openly. But those who have been impacted by their harmful nature and those who have studied and can recognize harmful coded languages and themes assure you that this does indeed exist. Without critical examination of their views, we allow more than troubling viewpoints to fester and grow in our midst. If we're to continue to grow as a community, if we are to continue to spread the word about the mysterious and magical world around us, it is imperative for everyone who can to recognize that for too long we have permitted these evil people to associate within us. And here at Strange Times Indeed, we do not stand by the racists. We do not seek out these kind of conspiracy theories. In fact, if we do, we only will seek out to expose them for what they truly are, frauds and cranks within our field. I would also like to say to Benjamin Gundy of the Mysterious Universe, not only have we never used your website for research, but we never will. And as to the fact that you think that white privilege does not exist, well, I'll tell you this much. White privilege is exactly what enables people like us to spout off about UFOs, Loch Ness monsters, Bigfoots, all forms of the extraterrestrial and the unexplained, and be taken with any degree of seriousness. You think that this field isn't primarily white for a reason? It's because who else would take us lunatics seriously? So that's where we are with the paranormal community, and that's why tonight, normally in place of the fundraiser you'd find to the side here for the Maryland Ensemble Theater or wherever it may live on your screen, tonight we are donating, asking for donations. All of them go to Black Lives Matter. You can find the link in my bio. Go to the bio page on my Instagram, make a donation. And my producer, Kevin Cole, I have been reading this book, Flying Saucers, Hoax or Reality, over the past week. And one thing I've discovered from this old and ancient text is that the pages rip out with every page you turn. So I got in touch with our producer, Kevin Cole, and he said anyone who sends him a photo of a receipt of any kind, or any people of color watching who just want a picture, send him a message with your address. He will take one of these ripped out pages, he will draw, he will illustrate a UFO, a cryptid, any sort of thing like that. If you're a person of color in search of some artwork, or if you make a donation to Black Lives Matter. Go ahead and do that. We'll mail that to you. You send us that, and we'll get you some art. That's some incentivized donating there. So I hope you will take the time, if not now, but later in the program, to do so. You're listening to Strange Times Indeed. I'm Cliff McCallister. Top news of the week. And this is news that should be concerning to all. There has been a Mothman sighting of sorts reported at O'Hare International Airport. Now, this is in the Chicago area, and this is not the first time we've had a Mothman sighting in this region. It has certainly happened with great frequency over the past year or so, which should be troubling considering what happened the last time the Mothman appeared with such frequency in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Now, this is a report coming from an airline pilot. His name and some company is redacted from here, but this is an incident that occurred on May 31st, 2020, 7:30 a.m. Now, this is a report given to the UFO Clearinghouse, and here's what it reads. Weather conditions, partly cloudy, but with a high cloud ceiling. Winds were light. Good morning. I wanted to reach out to you in regards to an incident that occurred on the morning of Sunday, May 31st, 2020. A little bit of critical information first. My name is and I am a pilot for I was flying into O'Hare International Airport at approximately 7:30 a.m. that morning. As we are taxiing off the runway and towards the terminal, I spotted something out of the corner of my eye. I turned to see a large black human-like creature fly up into the sky. I saw this creature for about 4 seconds before he flew up and above the cockpit window and out of sight. I immediately shouted out to my co-pilot, who caught a glimpse of it before it flew out of sight, and we were both awestruck by the sighting as it left us dumbfounded. I radioed the incident to the air traffic control, who made a note of the incident. The report of the flight was uneventful, and the rest of the flight was uneventful, and we disembarked our passengers without incident. I brought this incident up among colleagues online and was told by several other pilots that they had seen or heard from others who had seen the exact same thing that we saw. Yes, a donation. Yes, we'll put a pin in that. Other pilots would see the exact same thing that we saw. This is an abbreviated version of the incident, but I hope it helped to relay the incident that occurred to me and my co-pilot on that morning and what we saw. Location of sighting, O'Hare International Airport off runway 28R. Sounds like a Batman sighting. Could be. They did shoot the Dark Knight films in Chicago, so it is very possible that Christian Bale is having a hard time dropping that character. Now, a quick reminder before we further examine this Mothman issue. We are running a donation drive to Black Lives Matter tonight. There is a link in my profile. And if you donate like Sierra Gore did in the comments, send me a picture of your receipt. You don't have to show me how much. Any amount works for me. And my producer, Kevin Cole, will illustrate a UFO, a cryptid, whatever you like, on one of the teared out pages of Flying Saucers, Hoax or Reality. Some free art in exchange for a donation to Black Lives Matter, a very worthy cause. Now, this Mothman sighting happening in Chicago O'Hare International Airport. Now, the Mothman is troubled for a number of reasons. Many believe that the Mothman is either, I've heard about Mothman before, but vaguely. Sounds interesting. Well, guess what? This was the only other thing we had to talk about tonight, and you're talking to someone who really loves the Mothman. So we can get into it for everyone, because why assume that anyone watching would know what that is? Let's continue with this story first, and then we'll get into some history. This news is also coming from SingularFortean.com. This is a very recent news reporting. Now, I'm going to skip ahead past the evidence given by the pilot in the article, and we're going to go straight to a fact that this covering the most recent Mothman sightings. Now, this is just an overview. This is not information as to what happened specifically at these sightings, but just to give you an idea of how frequently Mothman has been seen in the area, or some sort of Mothman-like creature in that time. Now, the sighting reports in this area so far include a March 3rd sighting by investigator Manuel Navarrete of a strange flying creature with membranous wings near O'Hare International Airport. A February 21st sighting by a security guard at O'Hare who said he saw what appeared to be a very tall human, but it was solid black and with glowing red eyes. On January 23rd, report from a man who said he saw an egg-shaped object fly over O'Hare and shine a brilliant blue light to the ground, through which a person appeared to be taken aboard the craft. A December 6th sighting of a red... Now, that's an interesting one right there, because it's a UFO in the midst of these mysterious sightings, and no one's quite sure the origins of Mothman. We'll get into that later tonight. After that UFO sighting, a December 6th sighting of a red-eye winged humanoid near O'Hare. A December 3rd report of a red-eyed flying man the report coming from a security person at O'Hare. A November 26th sighting of a 7-foot-tall person with wings outside O'Hare. A September 29th sighting of a toddler-sized bat creature running like a gorilla near Barrington, Illinois. Now, that's also an odd one in the midst of these sightings. An October 3rd sighting of a large winged humanoid in Park Ridge. An October 29th report of a winged humanoid accompanied by several other beings who disappeared in a flash of blue light. Now, this aligns with the other UFO sighting earlier, and a late October sighting of an unknown flying human owl in Hoffman Estates. An October 19th sighting of a giant-sized bat outside the Edward Hotel in Rosemont, Illinois. An October 5th sighting of a tall creature with bright red eyes and large wings near O'Hare International Airport. And finally, a report from July of a 6-foot-tall creature flying over Des Plaines River near Rosemont. Now, these are all a very troubling run of Mothman sightings in the Illinois area. Tonight, we will be getting into the history of the Mothman, and we will also have open lines. If you have something you'd like to call in and talk about, we will be here to take your calls. 1 second for the tunes. I believe an ad break is coming up. Give it 1 second. Yes. Strange Times Indeed with Cliff McCallister is brought to you by Pride Month. Did you know that Pride started as a riot? It did. That's a very true fact. You can look it up anywhere. Specifically, look up Marsha P. Johnson, a black trans woman. And speaking of, one thing that we love here on Strange Times Indeed is to have our shows soundtracked by the music of Wendy Carlos. Wendy Carlos, a trans composer and I believe the inventor of the Moog synthesizer. Now, I, Cliff McCallister, am not an expert on synthesizers, so that fact might be wrong, but she very much did the soundtrack to Stanley Kubrick's Clockwork Orange. So happy Pride Month, and thank you for watching Strange Times Indeed. Do I think it's a real story? Well, give me 1 second. To catch up on the chat. Ah, yes, do I think the Mothman is a real story? Well, you bet I do. And this is a prop I was not intentionally planning to show you tonight. But years ago, I visited the International Mothman Festival held in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Now, Point Pleasant is the place where the Mothman was first sighted in a series of troubling incidents and sightings that eventually led to the collapse of the Point Pleasant Bridge. I don't believe that's the name of the bridge. I do think I'm getting that wrong, and unfortunately, I do not have a copy of Jordan Keel's. Not Jordan Keel's. I'm skipping. I'm flipping the names. Anyway, Keel, John Keel, Jordan Peele, John Keel. Jordan Peele is the director, and John Keel is the writer of the Mothman Prophecies. Now, he is a famed cryptozoologist who cataloged the entire run of Mothman sightings in his book, The Mothman Prophecies. Now, The Mothman Prophecies was later adapted into a film starring Richard Gere. But these sightings happened in West Virginia, in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. And do I believe in the Mothman? You bet your ass I do. Google acting slow tonight, getting me the statistics, but yes, this is something I purchased at a coffee shop down in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. One of the great things about the Mothman Festival is that it's chock full of Mothman-themed food. So, Point Pleasant, West Virginia. It's the early 60s. And the story begins as just about every story ever known to man. A teenage girl and a teenage boy hop in their souped-up coupe deluxe. What kind of food? Well, we'll talk about that coming up in Strange Times Indeed with Cliff McCallister. Now, as I was saying, this story begins, like all stories, in the 1950s or 60s, 1967, to be sure, but this story probably more accurately begun sometime around 1966. The story begins, as all do, with a young couple, a teenage boy and a teenage girl. They hop in their nice car and drive on down to the old abandoned TNT plant. Yes, that's right, the TNT plant, where the government was making explosives and war devices of some radioactive materials of sorts for the old war, for World War II. They were stored there in the TNT area. Now, this area, not necessarily the safest place to be, but it is a secluded area, far off the road and out of town, where teenagers can safely go to make out, as this was an abandoned area. The government had ceased to use it for their own means, and had since taken to using it, well, for pretty much nothing at all. Alright, so picture this. Johnny's in the front seat of the car, and he's really rocking to make out with Sally. There they are. They're going at it. Tongues in each other's mouths. It's out of control. It's wild. It's a crazy good time. It's the best good time you could have in the 60s, and that's probably because you are white. Like I was saying, tonight we are accepting, taking donations to Black Lives Matter. You take a donation, email the picture of your receipt to Kevin.Cole, our producer. He will draw a UFO cryptid on one of the pages from these books. He will mail it to you, so send him a receipt for your donation to Black Lives Matter and send your address. Now, this young white couple is getting hot. They're ready to go. They're in the front seat of their car. They're in the back seat of their car. They're going nuts when all of a sudden they catch something out of the corner of their eye. Up in the corner of the old TNT plant, a large creature, perhaps egg-shaped in its initial appearance, but large, dark, fully shadowed, with bright red, glowing eyes. And it stares at them, and they stare back at it. Its hypnotic red eyes looking deep into their souls. And as anyone would, they are immediately struck with fear. They hop in the front seat and hightail it out of the TNT area, but this is not where their story ends, because as they're going down the road, this creature up on the top of the banisters takes flight. These huge wings, fully unseen, shown in shadow. Read that later. They're fully covered in shadow, flying towards them, just swooping down at the car. They're scared for their life. Eventually, they get out of the TNT area, back on the main roads. They've escaped it. They're scarred. They file a police report, and that is not where the sightings end, but that is the most prominent one and the one that I remember the most. But this is where the story begins. John Keel, cryptozoologist, makes his way to town. Cryptozoologist and UFOologist starts going around. He's asking questions. He's finding out about other sightings. So-and-so saw it by the barn. One man lets his dog out at night, and the dog doesn't come back. A strange sighting of a creature with glowing red eyes off in the distance. This is the Mothman. We'll be talking about the Mothman some more. I'll end this tonight on Strange Times Indeed with Cliff McCallister. Now, let me get the music going again. And let me remind you that Strange Times Indeed with Cliff McCallister is brought to you by Pride Month. Our soundtrack, as always, is Wendy Carlos, the trans composer behind the Clockwork Orange soundtrack, and many others, and perhaps the inventor of the Moog synthesizer. Wendy Carlos, look her up. Point Pleasant, 1967. West Virginia, about a 7-hour drive from Frederick, Maryland. What does Frederick, Maryland have to do with our story? Well, that is the town where Strange Times Indeed is recorded and broadcast out to you, our viewing public. I'm Cliff McCallister. Tonight, we're talking about the Mothman. Mothman sightings seen in O'Hare International Airport, and The Shining. That is a fact I did not know, but could have gasped. Thank you for the help, Colin. Now, well, as I said, we are talking about the Mothmans, but it's also 9:25 at night, and we have not taken a single call 25 minutes into our broadcast, so just remember this is a call-in show. If you'd like to call in, well, then we can talk about whatever you want, these strange sightings, and we are having open lines tonight, which means call in if you've had a strange experience that you'd like to share. Sometimes these things are pressing. You gotta get them out soon. If you witnessed something strange in the world in the last 24 hours, you're more than welcome to call in and tell us about it before it escapes your precious memory. We're also talking about the Mothman, a subject that I know a lot about, but was not originally implying to go into this much tonight. But one of our viewers reminded me that Switched on Bach, that's the other album that we've played for the last 2 episodes. But as another viewer told me, I know somewhat about the Mothman, but not enough, and I realized maybe other people don't know about the Mothman as much as me. So, it's story time tonight on Strange Times Indeed with Cliff McCallister, and don't forget, we're always taking your calls. So there we are. Point Pleasant, West Virginia, 1967. Our story begins with two teenagers being chased off of the road by a flying creature with red eyes. As we noted earlier, couples noting a creature off in the distance of their house, staring at them, peering at them through the window. And I'll tell you this much, when I was a child at the Twin Ridge Elementary School public library, public as in it was the library inside the school, there was a book specifically focused on cryptids and monsters known across the United States. Each one about 2 pages of information, so, you know, the basic amount of information that you can give a child about these kind of things, and then an illustration, and all of them seem to be the normal, the Bigfoot one, but the Mothman one is the one that struck true fear into my heart from the beginning. The image of this creature peering in through a window. It was just an illustration, not a real picture, mind you, but the idea of it peering in with these bright red eyes. And growing up, I had a sincere fear of my bedroom window because I knew that if a large flying creature with bright red eyes was to be peering into my window, a Mothman of sorts, it would obviously be able to fly. And being on the 2nd floor of a house, you don't want to see something like that peering into your window. That's how I grew up. So yes, do I think the Mothman is real? Absolutely. Now, these other sightings happen across town. The dog goes missing, terrible things. John Keel's investigating all this. He noticed that he starts getting trailed. And this is one of the first recorded occurrences of findings of the men in black. These men, black coats, black hats, sunglasses, follow John Keel around town. He's starting to get worried. They start asking questions. They start trying to find out what he knows about these sightings. And they start trying to shut him up. Trying to shut up people in town. No one should know about this strange Mothman sighting appearing at various intervals. Nobody knows where it comes from or where it goes, but it was first sighted in the TNT area. Men in Black, that is correct. First sighted in the TNT area in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, a former government compound where things were housed. Did not know this is where yeah, absolutely. This is one of the first main instances where it was recorded. Now, a lot of people don't associate with that because that plot is not in the film. The film is a modernized retelling of the Mothman story, but they take some artistic liberties, to say the least. Now, these sightings occur, and they're not that big thing. Did the government create the Mothman? Well, I do not believe so. And here's the thing that happens. They get all the way through the year. December 15th, 1967. I can't tell this part of the story with this song playing underneath. Hold on one second. That's a subtle cue that what's coming up is a bit of a downer. Another downer, the current state of the world. And we are taking donations to Black Lives Matter tonight. If you make a donation to them tonight, either through the means or through the link in my bio, you send us a picture of your receipt and your address, and our producer Kevin Cole will illustrate a UFO, a extraterrestrial, a cryptid, something strange on these pages, mail it to you, some special art as an incentive for donating. And if you're a person of color watching and you just want some art, go ahead and let us know. You get it for free, baby. December 15th, 1967. 10 days before Christmas, a bridge over the Ohio River, bridging Ohio itself and Point Pleasant, West Virginia, home at the time of the Mothman. The day started out as any other. Nothing particularly strange happens during the day. And then at night, a river filled with cars, filled with people, filled with presents. 46 people in this Silver Bridge collapse, Point Pleasant, West Virginia. These are real people, and certainly there are more who fell who survived. But this is the day that the Mothman sightings stopped. There have been stories told that in the days leading up to the bridge collapse, a collapse that after rigorous examining in the aftermath was found to be done by natural causes. There was no interfering with the bridge, and structural element ceased to hold as it usually did, and the bridge collapsed. But it's said that in the days leading up to this tragedy, the Mothman had been sighted on the posts over the bridge. Was he crushed under the bridge? No. He was not sighted at the time. He was not found in the aftermath. But that is the day that the Mothman sightings ended in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Now, some could say perhaps that's the day when the sightings ended because that's the day that the town found true tragedy and had no more need to fixate on these sort of things. But I think it's because the Mothman was sent as a harbinger of the end, a warning of what was yet to come. It appears a year before the bridge collapse, and sightings occur in increasing amounts until all of a sudden this tragedy strikes the community. And now we have almost a year's worth of increased sightings of the Mothman at Chicago's O'Hare International Airport and in the surrounding areas. Is Chicago headed for a hard time? Is there trouble? Well, judging by how the police have been behaving, that is very likely, and this could be leading up to what the Mothman might be warning us about there. I don't know, but the situation places seem to be getting worse and worse as times go on. And as we said earlier, there is a lot of trouble in the paranormal community with racism and homophobia, prejudice all across the board, and we do not stand with those beliefs or those ideas. But tonight we are sponsoring Black Lives Matter, or we're not sponsoring them, we're donating to them. We're donating to them because now's the time to listen to these communities, and it was always the time to listen to these communities, but we didn't listen to them for so long that now we've got police officers in the streets who don't believe that they can get any sort of punishment for doing any sort of crime. They're killing left and they're killing right. They're killing people across the world, or across this country. And they've been told time and again by the justice system that there will be no consequences. And now there's a great uprising happening in our country, and we at Strange Times Indeed stand behind it with our full force, our full might. And we are encouraging viewers tonight. Donate to Black Lives Matter either through your own means or through the link in my bio. My producer Kevin Cole will draw a UFO, an extraterrestrial, anything from this on a page of this very flimsy book from the 20s. I tell you, every page, I started to read it this week, every page rips out of this thing like a communion wafer. It just snaps at the bend, so you can see the way the pages are going there, like an old post-it, like a post-it note that you're going through. Every one of these, we will draw an illustration on it. We will mail it to you if you make a donation of any amount to Black Lives Matter. Now, if you are concerned about the Mothman, or you have had a strange encounter in the recent past, we encourage you to tune in and call in to our show. This is a call-in program. We were talking tonight about the Mothman. We went over the history of Mothman sightings in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. And now we are here, with an increasing amount of sightings happening at Chicago's O'Hare International Airport. Trouble indeed for Chicago, it seems. Thank you for the story. I understand Mothman now. Thank you. I am glad to help. Now, I did hear a covering of this. If you have ever listened to the Lore podcast, there is an episode about the Mothman. And I've had trouble finding information that fully backs up what is said at the end of this episode of his podcast. But Aaron Mankey, the host of Lore, says that at the end of the Mothman saga, years after Point Pleasant, West Virginia, there's a strange amount of increased sightings of the Mothman in a different part of the world. And that part of the world, up until the end of the Mothman sightings, was Chernobyl. Now, I have had trouble finding information that backs up this particular element of the story, but it is a part of the story that has been told in the Lore podcast. So look that one up on your own. I would do that tonight if I had planned to go this in-depth into the Mothman. Well, here we are. So if you have concerns like these, if you have seen a Mothman or perhaps a strange or mysterious entity in your life, we encourage you to call in to Strange Times Indeed. Share that with us. We have open lines, so anything strange that you have encountered, you're more than welcome to call in and tell us about it. You're watching Strange Times Indeed with Cliff McCallister. And that's me, Cliff McCallister. You're still watching Strange Times Indeed with Cliff McCallister. Thank you for staying with us. Just had to refill the water bottle, or the old mug, from the water bottle. Strange Times Indeed with Cliff McCallister. Now tonight we've been talking a lot about the Mothman. We do have open lines for anyone who would like to call in and report a strange occurrence that they may have experienced. We put a call out on our Instagram story recently. We said, if you have a true story, what theme type of show would you need to call in on to talk about it? This is like, what kind of paranormal topic, what strange occurrence have you encountered? What subgenre? Is it a ghost thing? Is it a UFO thing? Is it a Mothman sighting? If we had to do an episode around that theme, what episode would you be most likely to call in with a true story? And the response that got the most interest was ghosts. So next week on Strange Times Indeed with Cliff McCallister, we'll be starting this show Thursday at 9 p.m. as always, and we will be talking ghosts. We want to hear ghost sightings. We want to hear any of your true ghost stories. Call in. We'll be talking about ghosts next week on Thursday at 9 o'clock, Strange Times Indeed with Cliff McCallister. And in the interim of that episode, if you don't have a ghost story to share, if I've got time to fill, we'll be getting a read from the old Spirits of Frederick. That's correct. Spirits of Frederick County, Maryland. This is a book published in 1979. Spirits of Frederick by Alice T. Weinberg. So we're going to be delving into some true local ghost stories next Thursday, 9 o'clock. We want to hear your true stories, and we want to hear some new ones. Thought it was the end of the record for a second. Nope. Here we are, Strange Times Indeed with Cliff McCallister. We've been talking about the Mothman. We've been talking about injustice in our society. We've been talking about an increasing number of sightings of the Mothman at Chicago's O'Hare International Airport. A lot of the Chernobyl is hard to find primary sources for. Yes. Amber G. Wiz in the comments doing the research on Mothman at Chernobyl. This is an interesting update to the Mothman story that was brought to our attention by the Lore podcast. But it's very hard to find information that backs up this source. What's a crazy story you've heard on this show? Well, we're only 2 episodes into Strange Times Indeed, so the craziest stories we have heard, well, we haven't had too many of them. We had an incident, sighting of a squirrel with pure black eyes, like a black-eyed child, but in a squirrel form, following a girl home and peering in through her window, this squirrel with pure black eyes. And then we've also had a story we were talking in the first week. In our very first episode, we talked about a dimensional rift that has been found by NASA at the Antarctic. In the Antarctic, where it connects to a parallel universe where NASA believes that time could be moving backwards instead of forwards. You laugh, but this is a true story. You can look it up. It was the topic of our very first episode, and in this world, they know this because there are these intergalactic particles. They come in from space, and they come at the Earth. Now, these particles are particle size, but not small enough to go through the Earth. So they've never... And what they encountered in the Antarctic... What they encountered in the Antarctic were these particles coming out of the ground. This is something these particles don't do because they do not come from the Earth. They do not bounce off the Earth. They hit the Earth. They end there. Now, all of a sudden, there's a spot in the Antarctic where these particles are coming up. And it is believed that this is a rift into a dimension where time moves backwards instead of forwards. This is a world. Picture it, if you will. This is from our first episode. This is the strangest thing we've talked about, and a very real thing it seems to be. A world where time moves backwards. In this world, all of these things are normal. When you are born, when you die, that's when you are born. At your moment of death, that's when your life comes into the world, and you travel through your life, getting younger and younger, until eventually you're a small, crying mass, and all you can do is scream and cry until a doctor picks you up, wet and covered in stuff, and shoves you back inside the loving glow of your mother. And that's how your life ends. That is the world that is normal in this other universe. And NASA may have found a rift to that very world at the Antarctic. Wow, that timed out well with the music, I'll tell you that much. Always, as always, I'm doing the sound mixing with my big toe, so if while watching Strange Times Indeed you find the music is too loud that you can't hear me, or too distracting, just let me know what to do with my toe. I'm Cliff McCallister, and you're watching Strange Times Indeed. We've got about 15 minutes left in the show tonight. Still no calls, and that's alright. We've been coasting along pretty well. Recapping the story of the Mothman and the world. Some more recent sightings of the Mothman in the world. We also spoke out at the beginning of the program about the injustices going on in the world and the inherent biases in the paranormal community. Those who do not believe in white privilege and those who seek to say that everything that's going on now, this uprising of the people, is some kind of deep state conspiracy. And we spoke out to say that we at Strange Times Indeed do not stand by these beliefs, do not stand by these stories, these falsehoods. And we do not seek to put out this kind of propaganda into the world. I'd like to share a quote. Now, this is a quote. This is very important that we talk about it, this especially at this time. This is important information about the UFO community. Now, this comes from Shane McClelland of the Q Files. This is a quote we read earlier in the show, but I'm going to share it again because I do think it's important. There is an ugly truth at the core of the weird world. No matter which community you inhabit, paranormal, UFO, conspiracy theories, cryptids, etc., Many of the foundations were laid by people who hold terrible views. Among them, white supremacy, racism, xenophobia, misogyny, homophobia, and transphobia, said Shane McClelland of the Q-Files. It is imperative for us to accept that truth and to recognize that few of these views are often expressed clearly and openly. But those who have been impacted by their harmful nature and those who have studied and can recognize harmful coded languages and themes assure that this does indeed exist. Without critical examination of their views, we allow more than troubling viewpoints to fester and grow in our midst. If we're to continue to grow as a community, if we're to continue to spread the word about the mysterious and magical world around us, it is imperative that everyone who can to recognize that for too long we have permitted these evil people to associate with us. And these are not people we want or need in the paranormal community, and they are certainly a hurt to our cause. We do not stand with them. These racists, these bigots, we seek to get rid of these old and racist theories that explain the strange things that happen in our world. We do wish to talk about the strange things that happen in our world, and we are encouraging people this week. If you listen to Strange Times Indeed, if you've enjoyed this show, please make a donation to Black Lives Matter. There is a link in our bio. Link to Black Lives Matter, and my producer, Kevin Cole. You send him a picture of your receipt. Doesn't matter how much, any amount is good. Send it to him. And I've been reading Flying Saucers, Hoax or Reality over the past week, and I found that every single page, just you turn the page, and the page cracks like a communion wafer. So you send your receipt to Kevin Cole. You can make the donation now, you can make it after the show, but let him know where you live. He's a good person. He won't misuse that information. He'll only use it to send you an illustration drawn on one of these pages. That illustration could be of a UFO, of a cryptid, of a strange thing. You can say, draw whatever you want, just make it weird. Or you could make a request, and he will draw that for you, mail it right to your address. All you gotta do is make a donation. Or if you're a person of color watching the show, you don't have to make a donation at all, just tell him you want a picture. This is Strange Times Indeed. I'm Cliff McCallister. Well, my friends, we've got about 10 minutes left in the show. I've really enjoyed talking to you tonight about the Mothman, the increasing sightings out of O'Hare International Airport, and the earlier sightings at Point Pleasant, West Virginia. This show has been a real thrill, and I'd like to show off once again this nice piece of tree art that I bought in Point Pleasant, West Virginia when I attended the Mothman Festival. That's our boy, the West Virginia Point Pleasant Mothman, who has recently been sighting at increasing increments in Chicago. Could a tragedy similar to the Silver Bridge collapse be on its way to Chicago? Who's to say, but let me tell you another troubling Mothman story. Now, this is one that I encountered myself. This is a true story. And before we go into the story, I'd like to remind you all that this is a call-in show. If you've experienced anything strange or unexplainable out in the world, you are encouraged to call in, and we'll talk to you. We've got 10 minutes left, so if you've got a pressing tale to tell it now. Otherwise, I've got another conversation to tell you about. Another story related to the Mothman. Now, this is a troubling one in and of itself. As I mentioned, years ago, I attended the Point Pleasant, West Virginia Mothman Festival. There I was, with my partner, enjoying the night, and a number of strange instances occurred over the 48 hours that we were there. Now, when we went, at the very beginning, there we are, we're at the Mothman Festival, and there's a documentary that's premiering the first night about the Mothman. It was a 2-hour-long documentary. Part of it, like we like to say, there are some racism flaws in the paranormal community, and one of the things that was first implied in this version at the documentary is the idea that the Mothman is the result of an ancient Native American curse that happened when the land was taken. Now, that is let's just call that a dumb white person idea. And get back onto it. So that was part of this documentary that was maybe an hour longer than it needed to be. Because we would just want to hear the good old Mothman stories that I told earlier in the night. And we're sitting there in the theater, watching this movie, and you can picture it, it's on the screen. The movie's going. This is at a time in American history, not too dissimilar from now, in that there were a lot of mass shootings. And so we're sitting there, we're probably in the third row, and a strange man comes up. He walks right up to the front of the theater, and he just stands there, looks at the screen for a while. Now, he doesn't look particularly suspicious, but he's a little tattered, he's a little worn, he looks a little out of it, a little odd. He stands there for a long time, and then he goes and he takes his seat. He sits there, he watches the movie, and rustles to get something out of their bag, and my partner's very uncomfortable during this, and so, I'm like, all right, we'll just, it's probably going to be okay. He gets out a piece of paper, he gets out a thing, he goes up to the stage, because the show's being projected in an old theater, so there's a physical stage. He goes up to it, he puts his notepad down, and he just starts writing something. It's how, you can't tell what, we don't know. He scribbles it, he folds it up, he turns and goes to the woman in the front of the theater, in the front row. He goes to this woman, and he hands her the paper. He just gives her the paper, doesn't say a word, but very strange from the beginning. Hands her this paper he scribbled something out on, and then walks away, disappears. He does not return to the theater. This is the last time we see him. The next day, the Mothman Festival is in full swing. There are hundreds, if there are probably thousands of people gathered in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, to pay homage to this mysterious creature whose year-long sightings ended in the Silver Bridge collapse. So there we are. The Miss Mothman pageant is going on at the little waterway at the side of the river. And it's a traditional beauty pageant. No one's dressing up as the Mothman, but it is the Miss Mothman pageant. And we're like casually watching, but not paying too much attention. We go away for a little while, and then we come back. And we notice that when we return, a whole portion of the waterway where the pageant was happening is blocked off. You can't go there. And so we go, that's odd, like no one's saying what's going on. So we go look at some of the other things, we buy some Mothman themed food, and we return. The pageant has returned. It's taken kind of a weird, almost somber undertone. So we kind of go up, we start asking around. I notice a ambulance over by the side of the river. And so we're there, we're standing by the river, and no, you can't see anybody, nobody's particularly tending to anything right away, but there is an ambulance off by the side. And so we start talking to some people, and what we learn is that in that interim where we left, a man, we don't know who, this could be the guy from the theater, but that is just a theory connecting two strange dots that we found, which is how you build a conspiracy theory to begin with. But that's besides the point. Really, you work backwards for a conspiracy theory. That's all logistics. What we're talking about here is that one incident at the theater, and then a man who jumped, and trigger warning here, suicidal mention, a man who jumped into the water in the lake. We thought he got, he didn't get sick from it. It's not like the water was so bad. He jumped in and he drowned. It's also perhaps a bit of an assumption that it was a suicide, but it did happen, and he was said to be fully clothed. There wasn't anything weird about it beyond the fact that he goes and falls in this river and drowns in it. There might have also been a lot of plant plants growing at the bottom of that river that it could be easy to get tangled in. There are a few theories as to what it is or how it happened, and we weren't there to witness it exactly, but that is something that happened when we went to the Mothman Festival in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. A true story from the life of Cliff McCallister. And we've got about 3 minutes left in the program. So this is your last chance if something strange has happened, but other than that, we'll probably start wrapping this one up. What was in the note? We never found out. He handed the note? I wonder what was on the note. Yes, well, that's the mystery, I suppose. You're asking the rhetorical question. Yes, what was in that note? I'm going to jump into the water when I get home? Hard to say. We never got to see it. On another episode, maybe say how conspiracy theories are built, like how you mentioned. Oh, yeah, we could talk about how to build a conspiracy theory. Thank you for the show suggestion. Now, as we wrap up, I'd like to, thank each and every one of you for watching Strange Times Indeed with Cliff McCallister tonight. Next Thursday at 9 o'clock, we'll be right here doing the same Strange Times Indeed. A lot of people wrote in, they said, I have a real, true story that I would share if you did a show about ghosts. So next Thursday, 9 o'clock, we're doing a show about ghosts. If you have a true ghost story, please call into Strange Times Indeed. And in the interim, while we are waiting for calls, we will be exploring this book, Spirits of Frederick. Spirits of Frederick, a compilation of true ghost stories from Frederick, Maryland, where Strange Times Indeed is broadcast and sent out to the world. We'll be exploring that, and we'll be listening to your true ghost stories on Strange Times Indeed. That's next Thursday at 9 o'clock. Now, I'm getting the 2-minute warning from our producer, so before we go, I would like to remind you all that tonight and every night, but especially tonight, we are encouraging you, if you viewed this show, please make a donation to Black Lives Matter. The link is in my bio. If you do so, send me an image of your receipt. Send that to kevin.cole, and he will take a page from this book, Flying Saucers, Hoax or Reality. He will take a page from this. He will draw a UFO on it, an extraterrestrial, a cryptid. He could draw the Mothman, which we talked about a lot tonight. He could draw any strange thing on one of these pages, and he'll mail it to you. You get some free art, and you also put some real good out into the universe. You help this extremely important cause that's going on right now. As I said before, if you're a person of color watching, just say you want a picture. You don't even have to make a donation. That's not a requirement. If you're a person of color, just say you want some art. But otherwise, you gotta make that donation if you want the artwork. Thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you for talking to us about the Mothman. Strange Times Indeed with Cliff McCallister. We'll be back next Thursday at 9 o'clock. We had a wonderful time talking tonight. And we hope you will join us next week for more Strange Times Indeed with Cliff McCallister. Have a good night.